with black-green midrange, a deck that he's very familiar with.
Yep.
He writes about it all the time. Playing against Richard Centabnni, playing blue-white control, which is one of those decks that, kind of grew in popularity recently. I think we saw, I think it was Stanislav Sitka. He was playing blue-white control at a European Grand Prix. He made a top 8 with it. And then William Jensen most recently made top 8 with a similar version, but a little different, designed by Andrew Cuneo, with a slightly less win conditions, but with a Elixir of Immortality main. So let's see, we have the deck list now in front of us. What kind of list is Richard playing?
This version's kind of a mixture of the two, because the version that Jensen got second place in the Grand Prix last weekend, he only had one win condition and one Elspeth. And the version that Sivka played did not have Elixir of Immortality. What you find here is 3 Elspeths and 1 Elixir. So, Richard has actually taken the two lists and kind of jammed them together. You're not going to find any creatures. Aetherling is not something that people really want to be doing anymore. You see Kibler's going to be tapping some mana for something here. He's got a Vraska with a ton of counters on it that can take care of Elspeth. But, blue-white has really picked up because of Sivka's finish in Vienna, because of Jensen's finish last weekend in Dallas, getting second place. And Joe Lissette, when we were in Oakland, he won the tournament with this deck as well. So this deck is really performing now. People are going towards this deck and away from Esper. As you see Vraska take care of the Elspeth, Kibler plays a Reaper, necessary mana to be able to regenerate it and or give it Death Touch and pass the turn back to Richard. It's really, really popular. Now, Kibler's deck, on the other hand, Kibler wanted to go to Dallas very badly. He said he'd been working on this deck for a little while. He's been working on black-green for, it seems like, months and months. But he really wanted to try this take in Dallas. But as we all know, the weather didn't allow some people to be able to make it. So he said, I wish I could have played it there, but I'm going to play it again this week, and I feel super confident about it. What's different about this take?
Well, we've been seeing a lot of decks that they're basically, Mono Black Devotion is a very popular deck. And we've been seeing people adding green to it to sort of access the Golgari Charm. Kibler went in a different direction, though. He's not really a black devotion deck. He's a straight-up black-green deck, taking advantage of cards like Reaper of the Wild and etc. So it looks like we have Reaper comes in. Again, very good card against control, because once it's in play, he can give it hexproof, and it dodges cards like Azorius Charm and Detention Sphere. So it looks like Richard's just going to cycle the Azorius Charm here and try to find an answer for that Reaper of the Wild. Hopefully he draws a Supreme Verdict or another Elspeth. So Richard just has a Hollow Fountain for the turn and passes back. Kibler here in a pretty comfortable position. He's got a Mutavault in play. He also has the Reaper of the Wild, obviously, as well as Vraska, which can continue to uptick.
Now, Vraska is kind of an interesting card, right? Where, when this card came out, it was, all the hype or whatever of being the kind of like a unique Planeswalker. Flavor-wise, it's huge. But, this card, how good is it? It hasn't really seen a lot of play, but right now might be the right time for this card to be seeing some play. I mean, its Vindicate effect, when there's a lot of Planeswalkers running around as there are right now, is actually a pretty big deal.
Yeah, we need a way to kill Planeswalkers. If you're playing black-green, you can't just concede to a card like Elspeth. Elspeth's just way too powerful against a deck like black-green midrange. It's powerful in general, but in this deck in particular. So you really need a way to kill Elspeth. And I think Vraska is really great because, one, you can cast it earlier with a card like Sylvan Caridid, but plus, again, a lot of times the blue-white control deck, you can force them to tap out early to get that Elspeth in play so that they can't counter back. And then Vraska comes down and just kills the Elspeth right away.
You saw the split there with the Sphinx Revelation going to the bottom. Richard's going to use the Supreme Verdict to 2-for-1 Kibler. He'll get some scry action with his Reaper. He's going to put the top card to the bottom. He also took a Detention Sphere as well. He's got a couple dissolves over there. He's got a Sphere in his hand, so Sphere's going to take care of Vraska. And now it looks like the blue-white control player is starting to pull ahead a little bit.
Yep. It's tough for black-green mid-range to sort of deal with blue-white control, just because the amount of card draw and card manipulation can eventually overwhelm a black-green mid-range deck. We see this with junk all the time. It's kind of hard for them to compete with cards like Sphinx of Revelation, Jace, Elspeth, etc.
So now we see Kibler's going to play a Scavenging Ooze. Last Breath took care of that Mutavault. Falls with another Mutavault and passes the turn back. So, this is kind of issue with black-green midrange, right? Where, they've been kind of probably going toe-to-toe, as we did walk in the middle of this game. You see both players have a lot of lands in play, kind of haymakers back and forth. But one of these decks can draw a ton of cards, and one of them can't. And that's where a card like Jace and Revelation really start to take over for the blue-white control player, is going to cast in Jace and show you 2 Planeswalkers, an Elspeth and another Jace.
Yeah, and obviously, Kibler has access to a card like Thoughtseize, which is fantastic, But the problem is Thoughtseize can't stop your opponent from drawing a card. So even though you can Thoughtseize your opponent early and like strip them of a Planeswalker or Sphinx of Revelation, you still can't stop them from drawing one later in the game, which is always the problem that black-green decks have.
As good as Thoughtseize is, and it's obviously an incredibly good card, it doesn't stop the top of the deck. That's always been the problem with discard spells, even the best ones like Cabal Therapy.
Yeah, whenever you see black-green decks, whether they be junk or just straight up black, the biggest problem with Thoughtseize is that you really don't have a lot of pressure to follow up that Thoughtseize. You know, a deck like mono black aggro that's Thoughtseizing you, but also putting a lot of pressure on you to prevent, like basically limiting the number of turns you have to top deck. That's really where Thoughtseize is great against control. But if you're a black-green mid-range, there's only so much work Thoughtseize can do for you.
Yeah. Elspeth's going to come in. It's going to make 3 tokens. Scavenging Ooze is going to start scavenging. He's going to gain a little bit of life here. Kibler going to go up to 19. We'll see how many activations that Scavenging Ooze is going to put together here because, the bad thing for Kibler is he doesn't want that to have 4 power because an Elspeth's minus ability can take it down. So Read the Bones is where Brian's going to start off the top.
And this is a pretty good card, good addition to the black-green mid-range because, like we said, there's not that much that the black-green deck can do to keep up with a control deck and all the card drawing. Read the Bones is obviously a very powerful effect.
Yeah. We do apologize about the technical problems that are taking place right now. We are getting them worked out for you guys at home, but to keep you up to speed on the action, Dissolve did take care of Read the Bones. The Scry did go to the bottom. You can see Kibler's going to take a look at his graveyard here to see if he doesn't do anything else with the Ooze. But right now, Richard's hand is just stock loaded. He's got another counterspell. He's got an Elspeth going. He's got a Jace. So it's going to be a pretty difficult game, technical problems or not, for Kibler to win.
Yeah, basically, Richard's in the position where Elspeth's going to take over this game, and he can just use the Dissolves to make sure Elspeth stays in play.
Yeah.
So obviously, Read the Bones is a fine counterspell to target there, just because you don't want Kibler drawing multiple answers to a card like Elspeth.
So we've got a Jace. It's going to minus right away. It's going to reveal another Jace, a Sphinx's Revelation, and a Verdict. You see Revelation's going to go by itself, which obviously Centabnni is going to take.
Yeah.
And soon enough, he'll be drawing a boatload of cards and really burying Kibler underneath the card and life advantage.
And at this point, I think Kibler's kind of resigned himself to, this is going to be a hard one for me to win.
Yeah.
I'm facing down an Elspeth, and my opponent has a Sphinx Revelation in his hand. So, this matchup, game 1 is always tough because your cards just don't match up to the card quality of the blue-white control deck.
There's a Golgari Charm off the top from Kibler. It looks like he's main decking that card this week, and Dissolve's going to take care of his attempt to take care of Detention Sphere.
So
put a card on the bottom.
Despite how bad things look for Kibler, the last 2 draw steps have been pretty good for them. They've basically been 2 ways to bait out some of the counterspells in Richard's hands, which is what Kibler needs to do. The problem is he still needs to draw another answer to Elspeth, and he needs to get it to resolve. So we know that Richard does have a Syncopate in his hand, it looks like. And we're also getting to the point now where not only does Kibler need to draw an answer to an Elspeth, he needs to do it basically now because Elspeth is putting a lot of tokens in play. And you might get to the point where even a top deck answer won't matter. Yeah. So I think Kibler realizes that, and we're going to go to game 2 now.
Hey, drew his card. It was a land. He picked it up knowing that Elspeth's ultimate was going to be coming. Those tokens are going to be attacking for the lethal. Maybe we'll concede the game. So blue-white control does win game number 1 here. So we'll take a look at the sideboard. You have Brian Seklis in front of you. You're very familiar with Brian, known for a long time. The black-green master. How's he want a sideboard?
Well, he's got 2 copies of Lifebane Zombie, 2 copies of Doomblade, 3 Mistcutter Hydra, 3 Pack Rat, 2 Underworld Connection, 1 Ultimate Price, and 2 more Golgari Charm. Now, Lifebane Zombie is not really a card that you're probably going to want to bring in this matchup. Obviously, it's a useful threat because it can attack past Elspeth tokens, so they can't block it. Maybe you can go after a Jace early on. But I don't think he really wants to bring in Lifebane Zombies unless he thinks that Richard might be bringing in the creature plan, because there are some blue-white decks that board in cards like Archangel of Throne, as well as the cards like the 2/2 First Strike Knight. So he might bring in Lifebane Zombie to sort of counteract that. 2 copies of Doomblade, not very good against blue-white control. Mistcutter Hydra, probably definitely bringing in those guys. It's a good way to sort of fireball your opponent later in the game, potentially. Pack Rat and Underworld Connections, that's actually interesting. I think he's definitely bringing in Underworld Connections.
Yeah, 100%.
I think he might bring in Pack Rat as well, although Pack Rat's not great against a deck with, Supreme Verdict. He might bring in the Pack Rat. He's definitely bringing an Underworld Connection. He has 2 copies of Golgari Charm, which I definitely think are coming in, because obviously Golgari Charm is a way to deal with Detention Sphere, and Detention Sphere is one of Richard's only way to kind of deal with a Vraska.
Yeah.
So I think Golgari Charm is definitely coming in as well.
On Richard's side, you mentioned Mistcutter Hydra. Not going to be surprised to seeing him bring in Celestial Flare. A lot of good targets in this matchup. I think he can predict that Mistcutter Hydra is going to be coming. It's a popular green sideboard card, and it's one that Kibler has used in the past. So Celestial Flare is certainly going to come in here. He's got 2 copies of Pithing Needle. Now, we don't know if he's going to see Underworld Connections coming, but you see Vraska last game. I also saw Mutavault as well, so Needle can get some play in this matchup. Glare of Heresy, of course, not for this. Neither is Gainsay. Negate's okay. I think you can assume that Kibler's going to have a lot of spells after sideboard. He's, again, seen Thoughtseize, he's seen Vraska, he's seen Read the Bones, so things that are worth countering. Golgari Charm as well. Jace Memory Add Up could be brought in as just a card advantage engine, because I think the games are going to go pretty long.
I definitely would bring in Jace.
Yeah, because Kibler's deck just doesn't really seem that quick. You know, we've seen versions of Kibler deck with Dread Mangler, with Latrell be a lot more aggressive, but it doesn't look like he's taking that role this weekend. Then he's got another additional Last Breath. He's got a Sundering Growth, which can actually take care of the Underworld Connections, and then an Aetherling, which, again, it's kind of in the sideboard. I think what Richard actually has in the sideboard for is kind of the Control Mirrors, where time is of the essence. You got to get the job done pretty quickly. But with him being up a game right now, and it looks like Kibler's deck does have some issues with Elspeth and as a win condition, I don't think he's going to need that this go around.
Yeah, I really like the Jace and I like the Aetherling just because you want to kind of bring in, against a deck like Black-Green where they have cards like Thoughtseize and a lot of removal, you just want to bring in more threats, you know? A card like Negate is fine. You can bring in Negate, I guess, but in general, you don't want to bring in more permission against a deck like Black-Green midrange because they could be bringing in Duress and Thoughtseizes. You really just want more cards that can just go over the top and you can top deck later in the game.
Yep.
I mean, like we said in game 1, Thoughtseize and Duress, they're great at the stopping, you know, the early game and like stripping your opponent's hand, but you can't really stop your opponent from top decking. So you just really want more threats in your deck so you can top deck cards later in the game.
Yeah.
So obviously, turn 8, turn 9, you don't want to top deck a Negate, you want to top deck a Jace.
Yeah.
So I think that's, you're just going to put a lot of pressure on Kibler and his Thoughtseizes because do you Thoughtseize the counter spells, do you Thoughtseize the Planeswalker, or do you Thoughtseize the Supreme Verdict?
Yep.
You know, there's just so many angles of attack there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, this blue-white control deck, it's really interesting how this just kind of came up because, you know, it's been a lot of the talk this week, just in articles and of the internet, is how, you know, at this point, I think everyone feels that blue-white is better than Esper because even though Esper does have, I guess, you know, more powerful cards and, in theory, a better mana base, does it really have a better mana base when you've got 12 duels? But, you know, that costs a lot when you're playing against an aggressive deck. You've got the Scry lands, but those lands come into play tapped, even though they are powerful and you're going to have good mana. Basics are underrated.
I think basics are underrated, and I think you also have a slightly better matchup against the aggressive decks because you don't have so many lands that come into play tapped. Plus, you're just more streamlined.
Yeah.
And I also like the transformational sideboard of bringing in like Archangel of Rune and stuff against decks like Mono Red Burn or Mono White Weenie. You know, it's just I think you're just a little more better positioned against the aggressive decks that we have been seeing become more popular lately.
You see a Thoughtseize here from Brian's going to show a Divination, a Jace, and a Detention Sphere, along with a couple of lands. Among those lands is a Temple of Silence. Now, again, this is just straight blue-white. This is not, again, this is not Esper. But what we have seen some players adopt, and Joe Lissette did this last weekend in Oakland when he did win the tournament there, is that he just had, he had 4 Scry lands, 2 Temple of Silence, 2 Temple of Deceit. That's it.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of manipulation. There is a cost, obviously, because those lands do come to play tap, but, you know, if that doesn't end up mattering, you don't play against too many aggressive decks, then it's kind of a free roll.
Oh, yeah. And again, you're playing some come into play tap lands, but you still don't have nearly as many as an Esper deck. And plus, you also get to play a card like Mutavault, which Mutavault is actually a really, really good card in blue-white control because one of the cards that control decks have a difficulty against is Mutavault.
Yep.
So, you know, a great answer to it is your own.
Kibler with the Scavenging is off the top, but it looked like he misses the 3rd land drop, and he's got to Read the Bones in his hand, so unfortunate for Brian, he's not able to get there because now Richard is already starting to pull ahead. He hits land drop 3 and 4.
Wow.
And now he's got the options between Detentions for your Ooze. Do I just want to play Jason, potentially up it or down it and find some cards and let your Ooze kill it? You know, the tough thing here is that, you know, Richard is the one with the options. He's going to go with Detention Sphere on the Ooze and pass the turn back. It does turn on Golgari Charm for Brian, which he actually did draw for the turn, and Brian's going to pass the turn back.
Yeah, I'm surprised he actually went for the Detention Sphere there because Ooze really isn't putting too much pressure on him right now. Obviously, Jace is useful, but he knows there's Golgari Charm, so now Kibler can actually kill the Detention Sphere and attack Jace and kill it.
Yeah, this actually works out pretty well in Brian's favor. You see Jace is going to turn over 2 lands, which are going to go to the bottom. Supreme Verdict going to go to Richard's hand. There's your Golgari Charm to take care of the enchantment. Ooze is going to come into play. Brian will draw a card. I don't think it was a land again.
Yeah. That could have been the turn where Kibler really was able to turn all this around. If he was able to make his 3rd land drop, cast that Read the Bones, start getting things going. Unfortunately, now he's got to deal with Elspeth, which is 1 of 2 in Richard's hand. So It's going to be tough for Kibler to kind of pull this one out on only 2 lands.
And the thing that's really interesting about the blue-white control, as Brian draws a Lifebane Zombie, doesn't draw a land again, is that, and he's just going to extend the hand because he knows he can't beat Elspeth at this point, so Richard Centabnni is going to win the match 2-0 over the Hall of Famer Brian Kibler. Blue-white control takes down black-green mid-range, is that we've seen 2 different builds of blue-white. They're all based around Elspeth as being